Okay, good evening. Welcome. Lots happened since I did the last live stream. Covered a few of the big stories, obviously, on the channel. I haven't covered an NHL story, which I'm going to start with. The Arizona Coyotes and their scouts testing players outside of the NHL Combine in order to gain an advantage when it comes to the draft table. There are certain rules governing what NHL teams can do when they're looking at draft eligible players. And it appears that Arizona may have breached those scouting rules. Do I think they're the only team doing it? Nope. The punishment is $200,000 or $250,000 per player that they have been illegally testing. When I say testing, it's physical tests, it's mental tests, it's strength testing. Them on the treadmill, their skill set outside of the combine. So instead of guys going to a game and watching them and scouting them whilst, having a scout in the stands saying this guy touched the puck 10 times, he created X amount of chances, they're actually having one-to-one interviews with players, and they're doing physical tests, so endurance tests, testing how much they can bench press, for example, their cardio. So they're sort of overstepping the mark somewhat. This is broken in the last couple of days. We do not know how long the Coyotes have been doing this. What we do know is in the run up to the last draft, or also including and into this season, they have approached at least 20 draft eligible players in the Canadian Hockey League organisation, which covers like the regional junior leagues in Canada. Whether this extends to Europe and the United States Hockey League programs, we will find out. But it's big news because this is a team that haven't been in the playoffs for a while. This is a team that has had some money issues in the past, recently got new ownership, and it's a big thing for Gary Bettman, keeping the team in Arizona with the new ownership. It's an interesting developing story. I think other teams may get drawn into it. Obviously, scouts move around as much as players do. So a guy could have been scouting for Arizona who's now scouting for another NHL team. So other NHL teams could also be implicated in this scandal. It is a developing story. So if you are an NHL fan and have any questions about that, it's a complex issue. There's still things and information coming out. We'll find out more in the fullness of time, but don't be surprised if this scandal rumbles on for quite a while. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona lose draft picks and have to pay a fine of some kind. We'll see what the NHL decide. We'll see what they uncover, but that's an interesting little NHL story. Moving on, the Six Nations has been obviously a big talking point. We've had 2 rounds of matches completed. Ireland and France remain unbeaten. Wales... Okay, Wayne Pivac, it's a different style of coaching setup. It's a different style of defence coaching. They won against Italy. They didn't really have to play well to win that game. They lost against Ireland in I wouldn't say a scrappy game, but it wasn't the best game. So they're sort of in this transition phase. Ireland have got off to a winning start. They're winning games while not playing well. That's a sign of a good side and a good coaching setup. France are winning games when not playing well. They didn't play well today at times. The Italians really gave them a game. And I don't think Sean Edwards will be happy as defence coach, and the discipline was poor by the French today. But if they can win games playing badly, which is something they haven't done for a very, very long time, that doesn't bode well for the other 5 nations in the Six Nations going forward. I think the French have turned a corner, and if they can win games when not playing well, that's scary, because you imagine if the French are just in full flow. If they had kept the intensity up for 80 minutes, they could have put a cricket score on Italy, and they switched off and they allowed the Italians back into the game. By the time the second half rolled around, it was not certain to be a French victory. Scotland and the Finn Russell interview, coming off the back of that defeat at Murrayfield yesterday, and he gives the interview to the Sunday Times, which is then not only put in print, but also there's a video interview as well with transcripts. That's not a good look. It doesn't really help anyone in that situation. Gregor Townsend is under a lot of pressure with the Scotland setup, a lot of pressure there. And we'll see what happens and what comes out of that, and whether Finn Russell's international career is done. England didn't play well either yesterday. A lot of issues with England. I think that victory covers over the cracks, but they were exposed against France as well. Sometimes very one-dimensional attack and too much kicking and aimless kicking. So game management's a massive problem, and discipline as well. They weren't as disciplined as they could be yesterday. It's an interesting Six Nations. It's a wide open Six Nations. From the games that I've seen, I've been very impressed by all the teams in parts, but left disappointed by other teams as well. I think Scotland are the most disappointing team out of all of them, but I'm not very impressed with England either. I think there's a lot of players underperforming. Has the Saracen salary cap scandal having an effect? A lot of players didn't play well in both games, and you have to look at the game management, and that was very, very poor, very, very poor. And if Scotland had been, better in possession, England should have and probably could have lost that game. Israel Folau and his signature with Catalan, that's obviously caused some division. Some of the Super League clubs are seeking legal advice. The thing is, I don't think they'll win any legal case because the Super League and the NRL didn't deregister him as a player. He was always available to be signed, even though they said he wouldn't be made welcome. Although Catalan's game this weekend with Storm Ciara has been called off, so that's got to be rescheduled. But it's creating a lot of division. Opinions split. As a player, he's brilliant. The only concern with him on the playing side of things is his fitness. He hasn't played for nearly a year. His fitness is going to be the big question mark. He's not in the starting squad as of yet. He's still getting his fitness up, so that's a question mark over his playing abilities. How fit is he? What level of fitness has he kept up since he last played a rugby union match last year? So, and fitting him into that lineup as well. They've got to fit him in, and someone's got to drop out for him to go into that lineup. So we'll see what happens with Israel Folau and Catalan. I wouldn't be surprised if other teams just decide to target him for extra rough treatment, and certain players single him out for extra rough treatment. So that could be a flashpoint. So we'll have to see what happens when he plays his first game. He's still some way off, I think, full fitness. But Catalan have stuck their neck out, and they have been told by the Super League that if he does, cross the line on social media or any off-field infraction, that his contract will be terminated immediately, and that Catalan will face a rather substantial fine as well. So I think there's still more to come with Israel Folau. It already has created division. He hasn't even played a game yet, so that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now, Storm Ciara has caused chaos with the fixturing. If you watched my video earlier, I mean, that was just a brief downpour that came out of nowhere. We were expecting the high winds and rain, but we weren't. Later on in the day, when France were playing Italy, the weather got really bad, and the main road outside my block of flats turned into a river very, very quickly, and it flooded. We have had flash flooding. We know that a lot of sporting fixtures in the UK, at least, have been affected. Sheffield United Bournemouth goes ahead, and Sheffield United win that game. But Man City West Ham was called off very, very late. And I do follow West Ham TV because I do find them a good bit of fun, actually, watching fan TV on YouTube. The fan channels, they are quite fun. I'm not a West Ham fan, but I find it quite fun. They were on the way to the match when they found out on the radio that the game had been postponed. Communication between the Premier League and the fans could have been a lot better. They knew the storm was coming. We saw that at Murrayfield last night. So they did call off the game very, very late. Away fans had already made the journey. Some fans were already in Manchester when the game was called off. So I think that's really poor communication by the Premier League to the fans who travelled. And not all Man City fans live in Manchester either. So those fans who had to travel into Manchester, finding out when you're basically at your destination that the match has been called off very late on, questions will be asked about that. A lot of fans have been left very, very unhappy, rightly so. So we'll see what comes of that. But the Challenge Cup and the Super League were affected. The Rugby League Championship was affected, and League One was affected as well. A lot of games called off there. Horse racing was affected, both here and in Ireland. The Women's Six Nations games were affected there as well. So a lot of games have been called off. How these matches are going to be rearranged in the fixture list for a variety of sports, we'll have to wait and see. So that's going to be interesting to see how the various leagues and competitions concerned rearrange those fixtures. Now, with Man City's case, they're in multiple competitions. West Ham are only in the Premier League. They're out the FA Cup. They're out the League Cup. They've only got the Premier League campaign to focus on, whereas Man City are still in the FA Cup. They've got a League Cup final to play as well. They've got the Champions League and the League. So they're in 4 competitions. So the fixturing is going to get really, really interesting when they rearrange that fixture. So that's going to prove a headache for the Premier League and the FA Cup and League Cup. That's going to prove a real headache when they get that fixture rearranged. And we'll have to see when that all takes place. Same with the Challenge Cup and Super League matches that were called off in Rugby League, rearranging them, considering that the Challenge Cup is a knockout competition. That's going to be really interesting to see how the RFL organise that and get all the logistics in place for that, because the lower level clubs, this has cost them a lot of money. And so that's going to be really interesting to see how the RFL deals with all that fixture rearranging. Horse racing meetings get abandoned quite regularly because of the weather. They will have contingency plans in place, but even so, a lot of these events were called off late today. So, and the Women's Super League as well, the women's football, a lot of matches were called off as well. So there's been a lot of chaos caused by the weather. It's going to be interesting to see what the various leagues and sports do to rearrange those events and fixtures. It's going to be really, really interesting. The Man City one's a really interesting one because of the timing of when they decided to call off that match today, very, very late in the day. And a lot of West Ham fans and some Man City fans have taken to social media and they're really not happy. Regardless of what the outcome of the game would have been, they're really not happy at all with how the Premier League and the authorities have dealt with that, considering that Sheffield United and Bournemouth went ahead. So, you know, a lot of questions asked. I mean, Sheffield United chasing down Chelsea for a European spot, so that's getting really interesting as well. Sheffield United, they could make European football next season, just on their league form alone. So the race for Europe in the Premier League, is there, and Sheffield United are really mixing things up. First season back in the Premier League, no one expected them to be this good. They are really outperforming and overperforming, I think. But they're putting, a good marker down this season for their performances, and they could get themselves European football next season. So there's a lot of things going on. I think the Finn Russell situation with Scotland, I think, is one of the biggest stories to take out the last few weeks. He's said his piece to the media. It doesn't help the timing of it. It really doesn't help the timing of his interview with the Times, the Sunday Times. Some things are better left unsaid, because he's still eligible to play for Scotland. He's not, I said, I'm retiring internationally. He has stated, though, that while Gregor Townsend remains coach, he will not play for Scotland. He's made it his personal decision that even if he's called up, he will not play. Now, how long Gregor Townsend's in the Scotland job is up to the Scottish Rugby Football Union and performances. They could lose all 5 games in the Six Nations, get a wooden spoon, and he could be out of a job, or they could turn things around. This week off will be very, very interesting to see what happens with Scotland. But they are he's a coach under a lot of pressure. The spotlight is on the Scotland camp and how they've dealt with things. I don't think Finn Russell's helping the situation right now. Some things, I like characters in sport, and I like sports stars who do occasionally speak their mind, but there is a time and a place to do it, and I don't think it is helping the situation. And also the fact that he's waited so long to give an interview as well, and the timing of it, I don't think it could be worse. If he gave this interview in the week off and there's no game on, and so the pressure's off a little bit, okay, he's obviously got his side of the story to tell, but I think his international career, it's definitely on hold. It could be over. He's the Scottish version of Danny Cipriani, in the sense that his off-field antics are contributing to not being selected for his country. We've seen it with Quade Cooper as well, with Australia. I'm not surprised it went ahead. I think what surprises me is how poorly both sides adapted to the conditions. I think France-Italy today, there was less kicking and there was more running of the ball. And there was, the conditions in Paris were nowhere near as bad, but there was definitely a strong wind. There was a bit of rain in the air. The French and the Italians adapted far better to the conditions, with younger, less experienced lineups, I will also hasten to add, and they put on a far better spectacle than England-Scotland. England just kicked 90% of the ball they had, which, didn't help. But then Scotland didn't help themselves with their slow-paced attack. They have some really great strike runners. They made some line breaks, and then the pace that they were too slow in possession, and they turned down kicks at goal in the first half that were gettable. Yes, Owen Farrell missed some kicks, but those kicks that Scotland turned down have proved crucial. That could have changed the outcome of the game. if Scotland are leading at halftime, England are forced to play, and then you have a different mindset in the second half. The fact it took over 45 minutes for Scotland to go, right, we'll take a kick at goal now. We know that the line out isn't working. That's poor game management. That's poor captaincy by Stuart Hogg. That's whether Hastings felt, look, okay, the conditions aren't great. I've seen the opposition kickers struggle. I think we should go for the set play. The fly half has an input, but Stuart Hogg is the captain. You've got the senior playing group around him. I'm surprised that they turned those kicks down. Am I surprised the game went ahead? The Storm wasn't as bad as it has become. And I've seen sports played in worse conditions. I have seen like Six Nations game played in blizzards. I've seen football played in worse conditions. I've seen rugby league in the NRL played in tropical deluges. I mean, there was a game on the Gold Coast in the NRL a few years back where the weather, the pitch basically was underwater, and they still played the game. So I've seen matches in a variety of sports played in worse conditions, but it didn't help that England's tactics were so conservative for 70 minutes. They were just saying to the Scots, come on to us then. England showed no intent, ball in hand, really. They were content to defend, and their kicking game was poor. Scotland didn't help with their slow-paced attack. And I don't know, it wasn't a great game. It wasn't a great advert. I think the weather's a mitigating factor, but nowhere near as much as it became with how the game was played. It was played in the wrong way, and poor game management and poor tactical kicking by both sides. Both sides were poor. That was a game to me that showed two sides really lacking confidence. And this is two international teams that have been surrounded by scandal recently, with the Finn Russell scandal. I will call it a scandal because clearly his interview to the Sunday Times doesn't help anything, and the Saracens salary cap scandal with the amount of Saracens players in the England squad. I think that's starting to have an effect as well on the squad and how the team are playing, and is it dividing the dressing room? Time will tell. We'll see what happens. But in all honesty, it was a poor game and a poor advert for Tier 1 international rugby. I have seen some Tier 2 nations play with better attacking intent, if not necessarily skill, but it's all behind, okay, it's tough conditions. Let's not kick the ball. Let's run the ball instead then. Let's keep the passing short, sharp passing, simple, basic skills. That wasn't happening. So, and if you're going to kick, try and kick it infield, because you can get a knock on, you can get a scrum. They weren't even doing that. They were just constantly trying to kick it dead, and they kicked it out on the full too many times. So England's tactics were very one-dimensional in both games. They've been poor in both games. They were lucky to win that game. I don't think that game really deserved a winner. But I'm not surprised it went ahead because the Storm wasn't as bad as it has become. I think the time the game finished as well, I think, is a mitigating factor. Had it been a later kickoff on the slate, let's say they had 3 games on the Saturday rather than the 2, and it was a later kickoff, then maybe yes, you could have the argument of playing the game on the Sunday or rescheduling it for the following week. But the Hibs Cup game went ahead today, so the weather's obviously improved in Scotland today enough for Scottish Cup football and league football to take place, but the weather's right now there's a calm in the Storm where I live in the southeast. Earlier we had similar conditions to what Murrayfield had yesterday, except stronger winds. So it's been very unpredictable today. But you have to look at the amount of rainfall and the amount of wind damage, and the police and the emergency services would have given their advice, and they've obviously looked at the weather report and realised, okay, it is going to be windy, it is going to be raining, but it's going to be playable. I don't think they would have allowed the game to go ahead if it was too dangerous, considering the sport that is being played. But that is a fair question. But I think the teams let the fans down as well. It was a turgid display, and it was poor tactically by both sides. Really was. And questions will be asked about the tactics employed. I think if England, doesn't matter on the conditions, relied too much on kicking, they've got some great ball runners like Johnny May, Jonathan Joseph in that side, and they weren't utilising them. And that, for me, is a shame, because the Italians and the French today really proved that, okay, the conditions were not as bad, definitely strong wins. So kicking was difficult. Getting the kicks accurate was difficult, but they scored what? How many tries did they score? I've got to look at my notes now. They scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tries were scored in France, Italy, compared to 1 in Scotland, England. The conditions weren't as bad. Still testing conditions. Still cold, blustery, bit of rain, slippery ball. 8 tries have been scored by 2 teams. So if you know that kicking is going to be a problem, run the ball. And the Italians were definitely keen to run the ball, and the French decided to start running the ball as well, and it resulted in some really entertaining, open, end-to-end rugby. So you have to adapt to the conditions, and I don't think either side adapted very well. Ireland unbeaten, France unbeaten. It's a wide open Six Nations. I think that game yesterday could have given Scotland the wooden spoon, because I can't see anything in that Scotland side that says to me that they're confident, that they can break an organised defence, and can outmuscle teams. They just were not good enough. And England, apart from the last 10 minutes, weren't great either, and didn't cover themselves in a lot of glory with how they played, apart from 10 minutes in the second half, where they decided to keep ball in hand a little bit and test the Scottish defence, which we know is not a watertight defence. That Scotland defence has got a lot of problems with organisation. So I don't understand the tactics of either side, really, and whether Finn Russell could have changed that game at all by being on the field, I don't think it's the right conditions for it. But I think Scotland's breakdown was slow. They were too slow in possession, and England were happy to defend that. And with the few times Scotland did make line breaks, the follow up, the supporting runners weren't there. So it was a very poor performance by both sides, and that's a match with two sides lacking confidence massively. And I don't know what you can take out of that game, apart from it's probably best that it wasn't watched. It was a very poor game, really poor game. But now that the weather conditions have worsened, if the game was scheduled to take place today, it wouldn't have taken place, I have no doubt. But I think the weather wasn't as bad as it has now become. But we've got 2 more days of this storm to go through the UK yet. So I would say France are my dark horses. They were poor at times in the game today. They could have put on a cricket score, and they got into that comfortable lead, and they got comfortable, and they switched off, and Italy punished them at times. And Italy was playing to the final whistle, whereas the French weren't as great in the second half, and I think they lost that intensity, and that will anger Galtier, and Sean Edwards will be furious with that defence. And their fringe defence on the wings, Teddy Thomas was isolated in defence quite well by the Italians. The Italians worked out he was the weak link on the right-hand side. And Rattez, not being the biggest winger on the left flank, they targeted him as well to a certain extent. So the French flank defence down the wide channels is where the Italians found their success and punished them and got line breaks and really tested the French. And the French couldn't keep up that intensity for 80 minutes. Their concentration went as well. I think it's more they were winning the game and they switched off, and then they couldn't get that intensity back for the second half. The second half, they just meandered through it, and they could have thrown that game away. They really could, but they held on again, and they've proven that they can win when not playing at their best. And that is what I think is dangerous, is if the French turn it on for 80 minutes, they could put 50, 60 points on teams. They could. And when they play Scotland, that could be just a one-way freight train with the way the Scottish are playing and the way the Scottish defend. That could be a one-way freight train. And I think it's too early to say they'll definitely win it, but if you're a betting man, I think the odds on France have shortened. But the Irish are unbeaten as well, and I think with what we've seen, Ireland are winning games while not playing at 100%. But both France and Ireland have got new coaches, new coaching setups, and new philosophies, and their teams in transition, and they are adapting very well to their new coaches because they've got 2 wins out of 2 games. So if there is going to be a Grand Slam, I think the French might be more likely to get it because they're so unpredictable, because there's so many young players who are eager to play and play with flair, which is a French strength. 2 of their tries, the 2 tries in the second half, were created out of nothing. They had hardly any stable ball. They had a lack of stable possession. Where they're on the front foot, they were losing the contact, they were starting to lose the breakdown, and they created 2 tries out of nothing. But their discipline and their handling was a problem today. The Italians were better ball in hand than the French. They were less drop ball, less knock-ons, and the French scrum is another weak point, and the line-out malfunctioned as well today. So while the French won the game, they've still got areas of improvement, which again is terrifying. And I think the longer that Sean Edwards spends with the defence, and the longer that Fabien Galthié and Rafael Ibanez spend with the forwards and the entire setup, the better this French team will become. That's my honest opinion, is the French can only get better. And that's what's terrifying, is there's room for improvement, and they're unbeaten. Same with Ireland, there's room for improvement, and they're unbeaten. And I think that's where I think with Scotland, they've had Gregor Townsend now for a long time in charge, and their performances are getting worse. They're not getting better. England are going through highs and lows with Eddie Jones. They're good one Six Nations. They're really bad the next. Then they're indifferent. They had a better than expected World Cup, and they made the final. And they were favourites for that final, and then they just underperformed. So with England, they're very unpredictable. They're turning into France. And Wales with Wayne Pivac, because the Welsh had so long with Warren Gatland, I think it's a transition period for Wales. And, have they peaked as a group with that failure under Warren Gatland to get past the semi-finals twice in World Cups? Is that a lingering effect? But, we'll see what happens. I think, have the Welsh peaked as a group? Possibly. I think it's an interesting one about who wins the Six Nations. I think it's the most open Six Nations that we've had in the 20 years of the Six Nations existence. I really do. I think it's that hard to predict. And now with the bonus points thrown in there, I think it makes it even harder to predict, because it's just, it's a difficult one. But there's so many young players coming through for all the nations right now that it makes it more exciting, because there's going to be more mistakes. It's going to be some more open rugby, and we saw that in the France-Italy game, which we didn't see with Scotland, England. And I think the ability of all teams to beat everyone, I think Italy can definitely beat Scotland. I think Scotland could be the wooden spoonists, and I have real concerns about the future of the Scotland setup and the direction they're taking, and whether Finn Russell's the difference or not. I don't think the Finn Russell situation is helping Scotland at all. I really don't. And they could have won that game yesterday. Had their attack been a bit quicker at the breakdown, they could have won that game, and they didn't. I'm not surprised. Well, the Under-19 Cricket World Cup, I don't put a lot of youth sports or age grade sports when you're going through the Under-19s, Under-21s, Under-23s. While it's great to see players develop, it's important that when they make the senior level, they get lengthy run. They get given a chance at senior level. And Bangladesh are massively improving as a cricket nation from where they started from. But they play on the subcontinent. Cricket is a religion for India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. They've got some really talented young players. The important thing is, if they win at age grade, they when they develop and reach senior level, how many of those under-19s will still be playing in their mid-20s at senior level in all formats, be it Test, One Day, T20? How many of those under-19s take that next step and play at senior level? And when we look at their mid-20s, let's see where the players are in 5-6 years' time. When they're 24, 25, 26. Let's see where they are in 2025. And if they're still as a group and still playing and still at the top level, then yes, that shows a good youth development system. This is why I don't put too much emphasis on youth level sport. While it's fun to watch and very entertaining, you've got to look at teams that win World Cups or Euro Championships or domestic championships at youth level, who then go on to become winners at senior level. Very few nations get that right. And it's not often that you get a cluster coming through at the same time with a team that will stick together as a core of a team for the next 10 years. I think the class of 92 of Manchester United, that's why they dominated the early years of the Premier League era. Their youth system isn't producing the products it was. The Spanish system, they all came through at the same time and peaked at the same time. and went through the youth system, through their clubs to the national side, and they won a World Cup and 2 Euros. So it's all about getting it right at the right time. The same with the French at the early 2000s. They all peaked at the same time, and they all had come through together and developed together alongside each other. Same with the various Rugby World Cup winning teams. A lot of those players had played at youth level alongside each other and all peaked at the same time and came through as a good leadership call when other players joined later on. But it'll be interesting to see long-term Bangladesh's trajectory as a cricketing nation and where they end up in the rankings for T20, one days and Test cricket. That'll be interesting to see where they go and how they develop these under-19s to the senior level and introduce them into the senior side as a group of players. That's going to be interesting. And how many of them become superstars. That's what's going to be interesting. A lot of youth players don't necessarily make it at senior level. And while it is interesting, it's the same with the NHL draft or youth level. The England Saxons, which they used to have, and how many of them are going to get game time at senior level for their club sides in Bangladesh or wherever they play? How many of them are actually going to get serious first team appearances? And that's why I always say it's all well and good having these age grade teams winning championships and World Cups and club championships. But then you look at it and how many of them are actually getting the game time required at senior level. It doesn't matter if it's football, rugby league, rugby union, cricket, ice hockey. When they go to the senior level, how many games are they getting? Are they getting the game time? Are they getting the exposure to playing against seasoned professionals at test level or club level? And are they establishing themselves in a side? So that's where the proof will be in the pudding, is how many of these under-19s go on to have lengthy careers and at the top level. That's where I think you could say a youth system's working or not. And we could have the debate about the French youth level rugby union being great, but they're then transferring that to club level with the amount of overseas players in the top 14. We're starting to see the fruits of that labour with the French setup. But Entermac, Dupont, and all those other young players have to get the game time at their clubs. They have to be given the opportunity at their clubs. And does that mean you put a cap on the amount of overseas players? Does that mean they don't raise the salary cap as much? A whole lot of questions, get asked. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens, but it's an interesting point that you raise. That they've won a tournament, but it's translating that to senior level, and how many of those players, as I say, get an opportunity at senior level to showcase their skills in the various cricketing formats. That's going to be the proof in the pudding of the youth development. But it's a good point. It is a good point. Right. Any other questions? Because all the big sporting stories I think I've covered. It's the NHL playoff race. I mean, that's another one we could look at. It's getting very tight in both conferences. There's not a lot of spread between teams, and the trade deadline. We're not seeing a lot of NHL trades because the salary cap's lower. That's my belief on that one. So that's interesting. So when you have a playoff structure, it's getting into that playoff structure. And with what's happening with Arizona, could they be thrown out of the playoffs if they make it as a punishment for their breaches of testing youth prospects before the NHL Combine? There are strict rules in place, and they appear to have broken them. So there could be a scandal involving the NHL. What else can we discuss? I'm open to questions because that's why we have these question and answer sessions on my viewpoints on things. But yeah, the debate about the transfer window in football as well. That's another one that's come up this week. They're gonna Premier League clubs who were pushing for the earlier transfer window closing before the season starts, and now are pushing for have it to be back to where it was before. I think we need to have. It was a great idea. The other European leagues didn't want to play ball. I think UEFA need to look at the transfer window and when it's open and closing for various leagues, and make a universal rule across Europe for the transfer window for bringing players in and things like that. FA Cup, the debate about FA Cup replays. Yeah, that's still there. Should replays be scrapped? Should they scrap them for the fourth round, the third round, second, first? What's going to happen with FA Cup replays? A lot of empty seats at some of the replays earlier in the week. So the debate about FA Cup replays is still there. So it'll be interesting to see what fans say and the fans' viewpoint, because FA Cup attendances are down this year, and that's something the FA needs to look at as why. And having FA Cup games in midweek as the main rounds is a bizarre decision that I think the FA should seriously scratch their heads at, because it didn't work. I've noticed a lot of empty seats at FA Cup matches this season, and that really is a shame. It really is a shame, because it's a great competition, but it is favourite Scottish team? Neither. I'm not a fan of either Scottish team. I've got friends who are fans of both Rangers and Celtic. I don't have a team in the race, so to speak, when it comes to Scottish football. I have a soft spot for Aberdeen, I suppose, and I was watching Kilmarnock's progress last season. Well, that's my opinion. I don't follow Rangers or Celtic. In fact, I think everyone's entitled to their opinion. But for me, I'm not a fan of either Rangers or Celtic. I've got a lot of subscribers who I've got a lot of subscribers who are Rangers and Celtic fans, but I don't have a horse in the race. I think everyone supports the teams that they support. That's my personal opinion on that one. What did the husband say to his wife on Valentine's Day? I don't know. It's going to be one of these, isn't it? I don't know. Here's the divorce papers. What's for dinner? Will Liverpool go the season unbeaten? It's a possibility in the league season. Yes, they have obviously lost games this season in the League Cup and Champions League. But I think it is a possibility. They could do what Arsenal did with the Invincibles. They could do what Nottingham Forest did. It is. I think a very plausible possibility. I think with the way they're playing, and with the system that Klopp has in place, all the players are bought in, and I do think they could go the whole season unbeaten. We could have a record-breaking points total as well. They could break Man City's points record from the other year. I think that could go. I thought it couldn't be done, but I think actually the way Liverpool are playing right now, they could beat Man City's points record as well as the amount of wins in a season. It is absolutely doable. The way they're playing, even with injuries and suspensions, the way they're playing, it's. I've not seen a team play like this with such a lead as well. I mean, Man City, what they did was incredible, but they lost games in that season. Liverpool could quite easily beat the points record and draw less games than Arsenal and Nottingham Forest did in their unbeaten seasons in the top flight. So yes, absolutely they could do it. Whether they can or not, that's up to the Liverpool players and the opposition to beat them. And so far this season, no one's been capable of beating them in the league, apart from naming weakened lineups. I'm a Blackburn Rovers fan for me troubles. Have been since I was a kid. Do you think the Olympics will go ahead? I know the Olympic organisers in Tokyo are monitoring the situation with the in relations to the coronavirus. It's not. The thing is, the media are misreporting a lot of things and creating a lot of unnecessary anxiety and fear. I remember the SARS outbreak. I remember swine flu and bird flu. It is basically a strain of the flu virus. Is what it is. It's the fact that it is so contagious and spreads quicker, but it mostly affects people with really bad immune systems. You have to have an underlying condition already existing. I think the media are definitely making things a bit more complicated. We'll have to see what the Olympic organisers what happens when it comes to things. But the Olympics is some time away yet, and we'll have to see what happens. But I do think it most likely will go ahead. No sporting leagues have basically, as far as I know, I think the Olympics will go ahead, but they are monitoring the situation. That's what's been released to the press. As far as I know, no major international sporting events have been called off because of it. I mean, the Australian Open went ahead with the bushfires in Australia, which is still ongoing. They went ahead with that. They didn't call that off, even though athletes, the tennis players, were complaining about breathing difficulties. So, I think at the moment, we'll have to see what happens. The number of deaths compared to the number of cases is actually lower percentage-wise than SARS, and SARS got contained very, very quickly as well. And SARS was a far more virulent, dangerous strain of the coronavirus. But if you look at your Dettol, your bottles of Dettol, and what the bacteria it kills, quite simple hygiene and stuff. It's doable. I don't care, Mr. Baldington. You're a pain in the arse. You are just a troll. Go away. Bye. Oh, I love a good old troll. They do try. God, they're a pain in the arse. But with regards to the Olympics, the Olympics takes place in August, so there's 8 months to the Olympics, something like that. There's a fair bit of time until the Olympics takes place, 6-7 months, something like that. We'll have to see what happens and what measures they put in place to protect the athletes and the spectators at the end of the day. But I think the Olympics is too far out. But they went ahead with the Australian Open with the Australian bushfires taking place. So, at the end of the day, it takes a lot for a sporting event to be called off. It really does. It really, really does take a lot for a major sporting event to be called off. The KHL team and the debate about this. Look, if the Elite League hasn't gone there yet, and the major leagues from North America are ruling out a major league franchise in London. Questions. I mean, the NBA, the most profitable league in North America. When the Boston Celtics last played in London, because the NBA regularly takes regular season games to London, the Boston Celtics CEO was interviewed, and they asked him the question: will there be a major league team in London? And the response was no. So if the most profitable league is saying no, I don't know about how profitable the KHL team and league actually is and how you're going to market that to British fans. I really don't know. The fact that there is no London team in the Elite League, I think in order to have a team in London with the KHL, you've firstly got to, the fact the Elite League hasn't got a London-based team tells you all you need to know about the likelihood of a KHL team going to London. You've got to build a fan. There's got to be a fan base there first. And yes, there are ice hockey teams around the southeast of England playing in the Elite League and the National League in this country. But are there enough ice hockey fans in London? And the fact the Elite League hasn't gone there for whatever reason, surprises me. It does. But then you've got to look at the KHL and the travel distances between the rest of the KHL and London. They would have to play games in Kazakhstan, this team. Just what Kazakhstan and Beijing, they would have to play games. So you have to bear that in mind as well, is the travel distances for the KHL. If you put a team in London, you would have to have that team playing games, regular season, in Kazakhstan and Beijing, because there's teams in Kazakhstan and Beijing, and that I don't think is sustainable. That is not sustainable. That's going to be huge. And with the debate about being more eco-friendly with sport and the environment, that's not going to go down well with a lot of people. But the rumour's been there for a while. But if the NFL can't get a team moved to London, and the NBA are ruling out a major league coming not just to London but to Europe on a permanent basis, I can't see the KHL doing it because it's got to be able to make money. And the travel distances, it'll be insane, for a team from London, bear in mind the time zone difference as well, to play away games in Beijing, the other side of the world. It would just be madness, absolute madness. Yeah, I tend to keep politics off this channel, so I'm not going to say anything on Tommy Robinson. To be honest, there's no point in having a political discussion. I keep politics off this channel, sports channel. That's my answer to that. I've made my views on racism and in sport clear. I'm against it. I'm against any kind of discrimination. But I am going to keep my thoughts to myself on that one. This is not a political channel, and it never will be a political channel. This is purely a sports channel with the occasional horrendous storm outside. For me, the fact that he has got football hooligan convictions, I believe, that's the only thing I can think of where it would come up on this channel. But I have no interest in discussing politics or those kind of issues. None. It's not what this channel's about. This channel's about sport. What do I think of the winter break? I'm surprised the Premier League has waited this long to bring it in, yet they're still playing Premier League fixtures during the winter break because of obviously fixture congestion from the FA Cup and League Cup and Champions League and etc. I think it's long overdue. Other European leagues have been doing it for donkey's years. I'm surprised it took as long as it did to get the winter break in place. And actually, had they tried to play games this weekend, a lot of games would have been postponed because of the storm that we've had. So ironically, it's worked out having the winter break. I think, the Premier League and the Football League should have brought it in a lot sooner. And that lies with the FA and the various leagues. They were chasing the money too long, and the club country debate comes back. If other sports can do it and do it very, very effectively, I don't understand, and other leagues, I don't understand why English football has taken so long to introduce a winter break. I really don't understand it at all. It's amazing to me that player welfare also has to be considered because other leagues do it and their players seem to perform better in the summer tournaments, be it the Euros or the Coppers, the Copa America, the World Cup. So it is a massive surprise to me that it's taken this long, but the club country debate. It is the club country debate, and I think it's a good thing. Other leagues have proven that it actually benefits. There's a benefit to it. It's this time of year that we get the worst weather, as proven by this weekend. Had there been a full Premier League fixture list, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of games were postponed because of the weather. Look at Man City, West Ham. The fact they postponed that game so late is what surprises me the most. Considering that if you follow West Ham TV, and I find West Ham TV quite funny because they are a bunch of down-to-earth lads who like a laugh. They were at Milton Keynes when they heard the news on the radio that the match had been postponed. So I think having the winter break is crucial at this time of year. We know this is when the weather is the most disruptive. Just look at the last 2 years with the amount of snow we've had at this time of year. I think they've also got to look at the festive period and how they fixture games as well, the fixture congestion. I think they seriously have to look at that. And this is where the debate on having FA Cup replays scrapped. If you scrap the FA Cup replays, you do not get that amazing game between Oxford and Newcastle that we had the other night, which went to extra time and had 5 goals in it. You don't get that. I understand why the debate is there about getting rid of the FA Cup replays. But then in that case, if you want to scrap FA Cup replays, why don't you scrap the 2-legged semi-finals for the League Cup as well? If you're that concerned about fixture congestion and the amount of games players are playing, you got to look at the cup competitions and are they suitable currently with the modern demands of modern football. That's my viewpoint on it. If you're going to have a winter break for the league, you might as well look at scrapping replays then altogether. And a lot of fans like replays and stuff. Yeah, I know all the Women's Super League games were called off. A lot of the Super League, Rugby League, and the Challenge Cup games were called off. I think almost all of them were decimated by the weather. Horse racing was affected. It is interesting that the winter break is a discussing point now in football. As I say, other sports and other leagues and other countries have been instituting it for years. Scottish football's had it for a long time. So I do not understand why it has taken English football this long to look at other sports and other leagues around the world to go, we need a mid-season break. Other leagues and other sports do it really effectively, and it is actually necessary. So I'm amazed it's taken this long. Now, if that starts benefiting the national side, thumbs up. But we'll have to see what happens. I think it is a debating point that's been there for a long time. It just surprises me that the FA and the Premier League and the Football League have taken this long to go, yeah, we need a mid-season break. Because I think the leagues are chasing the money. And I'll be interested to know how many players want the winter break. How many players have actually, I would be interested to see how many players would have also wanted the winter break as well and put their hands up and had discussions with the FA and the PFA saying we're in favour of a winter break or a mid-season break at this time of the season. That's something that would be interesting to see the feedback from the players. But also you have to see the fans' response as well, because that's a big part of it. They're the ones who go to the games. They're the ones who spend the money, which pay the players' wages. So you've got to look at that as well. But the winter break is, I think it's a positive. I think it is necessary. But I think everyone's got their own opinion on it. I think everyone's got their own views on it, and that is fair. I know people who are not in favour of it, who just want to keep the momentum going. I think when you've got a team on momentum like Liverpool, who are going for this unbeaten season and trying to win 3 trophies now, would they want a winter break with the momentum they've built up and how they're playing? Would they want the winter break? That's an interesting one. So you look at the All-Star break for the NHL. Some teams perform better before the break and don't do as well after the break. Other teams seem to do better after the All-Star break than before the All-Star break. So it does have a benefit and negative. It can disrupt the momentum of a team. It can disrupt the momentum of a player's confidence. They suddenly got 2 weeks off. I would think the players will probably be in favour of having at least a mid-season break and time off. But we've seen with the transfer window being moved forward that the rest of Europe didn't go with that. So now the Premier League and the Football League are now pushing the transfer window back to where it was again. So you need it to be universal, where all leagues shut down at the same time if it's going to be truly effective. But we'll see. We'll see like what the response is long term after several seasons of having the winter break, and how effective it is, and what teams are affected most by it. Will teams lose form coming out of the winter break, lose momentum? Will suddenly teams gain some momentum? How players respond to it? How the fans ultimately respond to having a winter break? I think that's something where, in theory, should they play the FA Cup games during the winter break? There you go. If you're going to have all these replays and if you're going to continue to have the replays, should the replays be played during the winter break or the 4th round be played during the winter break? That's a question that I think you could ask. Because when the FA said we're going to have the 4th round in midweek, that for me was just stupid, because crowd numbers were down in the 3rd round and were down in the 4th round. There were a lot of empty seats at games, be it in the first time round or the replays. So I think the way fixturing is done by the FA and the leagues is, we need to figure out how they're doing it personally. But it's an interesting point. The Liverpool FC ladies 3 games in a row. That is interesting. I've never heard of a team having that many games off in a row. But I know the Women's Super League has been decimated by Storm Ciara, alongside rugby league and rugby union matches have been decimated, absolutely decimated. And could you have the argument, should they start the Super League season a little bit later, or should they change fixturing for the Super League? And then there's debates about changing the format of the Challenge Cup when it comes to rugby league. Itchy ear. So there's a lot of debates about fixturing and getting seasons completed and all that. And it is really, really interesting. So let's I'm just going to check the sports headlines while we're here, because we're waffling a little bit about stuff. Right, let's have a look at the sports headlines quickly. Let's see what's breaking right now. Let's see what's being said on the old Sport. BBC Sport. So, England have won the third one-day international by 2 wickets to draw the series against South Africa in the cricket. So that's just happened. Sheffield United came from behind to beat Bournemouth, so they're actually closing in the top 4, and that could really shake things up. They're having a really good season. The Scottish Cup took place. What else have we got? Celtic are drawn away to St Johnstone in the Scottish Cup last 8, so the quarterfinals. Ireland's women played Wales during Storm Ciara. Their game went ahead, whereas the England Scotland game did not. So that's got to be rearranged. I think the question earlier about should have England Scotland gone ahead at Murrayfield? Well, Ireland and Wales in the Women's Six Nations went ahead in similar conditions, if not worse conditions. So that's up to the organisers, really. But you know, oh god, it's going to be quite windy tonight. Let's have a look at the weather, because this storm is not going away. And of course, if you've got to rearrange fixtures or other fixtures, you've got to look at fixture congestion. Oh, that's going to be a bloody storm tomorrow, I tell you. This storm ain't going away. It's going to be really, really stormy. And then, so I think the weather's still going to have an impact on more sporting fixtures and events. Horse racing has been decimated as well, and that's a financial cost. So a lot of sports have lost a fair bit of money because of this storm. So that's an interesting one. I think the winter break, I think, having it is crucial. The weather this weekend, as I say, has put that into perspective. As I say, if we'd had a full Premier League and Football League schedule this weekend, how many games would have been called off? And then have to be rearranged later in the season. That's the question you've got to ask yourself. If we didn't have winter break, we would have been playing a full Premier League fixture list, a full Football League fixture list, and this weather hit. So that's the positive of having the winter break is you avoid having games called off and rearranged. The fact that Man City was called off so late is the debating point about how the Premier League and the authorities have handled that one, because fans were literally on the way, and some fans, especially some of the away fans, left really early hours this morning. They could have already been in Manchester when that was called off. So they should have called that off last night. They had full warning that the weather conditions would be bad. So on the Man City West Ham, it's also going to be interesting to see when they play that game, because that now means both teams have games in hand on teams around them. So West Ham, the relegation battle, and Man City in the fight for the top 4. But bearing in mind, Man City have got all these cup games to play in the FA Cup, League Cup, and in the Champions League. So Pep Guardiola, I don't think, will be happy with having fixture congestion later in the season. But it is what it is. It's going to be interesting to see when they rearrange that fixture. Really interesting to see when that fixture is rearranged and when they put it on. And how that actually impacts the season, be it the relegation battle or the hunt for European places. Because either side could lose or gain form and go on a losing or winning streak, and then that game in hand becomes really crucial, really, really crucial. Let's say Man City have a dip in form and slip to third behind Leicester. the prize money you get at the end of the season for your league finishing position. Let's say West Ham have a real dip in form and fall back into the bottom three. That game in hand could prove absolutely crucial. But it's when the Premier League can rearrange it. So there's my thoughts on the winter break. If we hadn't have had it, so many games would have been postponed and called off. So many games, it would have proved absolutely chaotic. Absolutely chaotic. So I think, yeah, I'm in favour of the winter break for now, but we'll see long term what the effects are of the winter break and how fans and players and clubs and things adapt to it, and whether it's a long term thing here to stay or the FA have a review of it and decide to get rid of it. But look at the success at international level from other European teams, getting to finals, winning trophies. Look at the lack of success England have had at senior level. These leagues in Europe have had the winter break for years. So your Frances, your Germanys, your Italys, your Spains, they have winter breaks. They are more successful at international level. There has to be some kind of correlation there. Players are more rested. They have that time off. But we'll see what happens if the FA decides to keep the winter break in place. If the Premier League go, look, we want to make as much money as possible. We would like, to get rid of this winter break. We'll see what happens, but I think without it, the amount of games that would have been postponed this weekend would have been through the roof. The fact that Sheffield United and Bournemouth went ahead, considering that Man City didn't, the geographical difference between Manchester and Sheffield isn't massive, but we'll find out, when it's rearranged. It'll be interesting. It'll be very, very interesting. On the cricketing side of things, yeah, the Tour of South Africa is going quite well for England. They won the Test series. They've tied the one-day series. Obviously, the second one-day international was rained off. So that's getting really interesting in South Africa on the cricket side of things. But unfortunately, hey, it's not on free-to-air TV. You've got to pay through the nose to watch it. So, and the debate about the 100 format. And what I've seen online is most cricket fans don't want it. And if it's aimed at new fans, what the ECB have done is they're risking turning existing fans already angry at how the game is governed off. And yeah, fans aren't happy. And I don't know how successful the 100 is going to be, but the feedback that you see online and the backlash against it before a ball has even been bowled or a run scored tells you all you need to know about the PR campaign that they've had, not gone down very well, and the fact that I don't think fans were actually consulted. I think fan groups have a part to play in how sports evolve and develop the experience. And cricket fans don't want the 100. They want easier grassroots cricket to be funded, more accessibility in the media, more free-to-air coverage on terrestrial TV. They're not happy with the packages that BT and Sky are charging them. The county game is struggling financially. Fans and non-centrally contracted players have been saying for a long time there are problems with the sport. So the ECB's response is to come up with an idea that isn't actually cricket, it's a completely different sport altogether. A more complicated form if it is cricket, of a sport that already exists. And I'm not sure fans are buying into it. I don't think players are really buying into it either. It affects the three formats that already exist domestically and internationally. And I'm not sure if it's going to work. And the fact that 95% of the existing fan base already don't want it says to me that cricket risks losing more fans than it gains. And the ECB are playing a very, very risky game here. With a lot of money, they've invested a lot of money in this 100, and this is a big amount of money that could have been spent on grassroots cricket facilities, on improving facilities at local clubs, improving facilities at schools, and getting interaction with youth level and grassroots level, and they've put it all into a tournament that no one wants. It's like a TV executive came up with the idea, and the ECB went, yeah, there's some money, considering that the sport is crying out for investment at grassroots level. I don't think this idea has been very thought through. I think the governance of the ECB has been poor for quite some time, and a lot of people have been critical for quite some time about the direction that cricket is taking. And the lack of accessibility of first-class T20 and one-day cricket domestically on the TV. which you don't have to. I mean, the TV deal that was signed in 2005 hasn't actually benefited the sport as much as you think, and so that's a question, that's a debate we could have. Is the 100 format that they're going to introduce this summer, and how people are not reacting positively to it. The PR campaign from the ECB has been pretty lackluster anyway, and the only people who are coming out in favour are those who are centrally contracted. Those players who are centrally contracted. For the most part, we're not getting the feedback from those who have a viewpoint on it, because the way the ECB are controlling the media releases is, if you're a non-centrally contracted player, you don't have an opinion on this. And I don't think it's as popular amongst the playing group, registered cricket players, as I think the ECB wants it to be. I think the ECB wants everyone to be yes men, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who actually have their opinion, and they're not happy with the format. A lot of cricket fans going, well, you've got the county set up, and now you're doing regional setups. No, I have no horse in this race. Then there's no London team. It's just it's not really been thought through. It's a badly thought through idea. But sports governance is like this. I think sports governance needs to be more transparent, and where the money goes. And it's, a lot of money involved in this, and the ECB are putting a lot of money on the line, which could be spent on grassroots development, which I think is where the problem lies, is getting participation from young people, be it fans or playing, and they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And questions will have to be asked about whose idea it was, and if it flops, someone's going to get sacked. And I think I have to do a video on this, and why I think the 100 format is not going to work, because they're aiming it at new fans, and that's all well and good. But if you turn off 95% of your existing fan base, those new fans aren't going to cover those fans who decided to turn their back on the sport and go, "I'm done with this." So I'm not sure how they're going about it. Really, I think they're trying to force through an idea that no one really wants, and the only people that are coming out in favour are centrally contracted by the ECB, so they're going to say yes, because it's probably written in their contract you have to agree with the ECB decision. You can't criticise the ECB publicly. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the players have got reservations about it, but they can't speak out because of their contracts. So I think the ECB are playing a very risky game, and I think it will not work, and I think it could damage cricket financially and the image of it going forward, because I think that the ECB's governance of the game and the TV deals in place they need to look at getting first-class cricket, possibly. I think most likely T20 is probably the best format to have on free-to-air TV, but they need to have something. The 100 is not the answer. There are 3 very good formats already in place. You've got first class, one day, and T20. There's some very good formats in place, and they're pushing through this hybrid format that no one really wants. They have to look at the social media feedback they're getting to realise how out of touch they are with actually what the fan base, and that's the crucial thing, cricket fans, the people, absorbing the product that they're putting out there, want. And from everything I have seen online and the feedback the ECB are getting, they've got to be looking at themselves going, I think we've made a mistake. There's got to be someone with the brain in the ECB somewhere, because this idea is crack-brained at best, and I don't know. It's something that's been written on the back of a cigarette packet. I have no doubt, and I don't think it's going to work. And I think it undermines the format's already in place, and it definitely undermines the county game, which is the basis of where you get your test players from. If it's undermining the domestic club game, then it's going to be more harm than good, personally. And I don't know, but I think the 100 format is definitely it's a flawed concept anyway. I did not, obviously, I don't have access to all the Australian media. There's been a lot of fundraising done by sports stars and celebrities for the fire relief in Australia. A lot of fundraising done. The fact that they've got players like Cameron Smith, who are rugby league players, to get involved, I think is a great idea. We have sport relief in the UK. I'm assuming this is some kind of Australian equivalent. the global sporting community has actually done a lot of fundraising for the fire relief in Australia. They've done a lot of fundraising and getting rugby league players and A League soccer players and rugby union players involved. I have read about it. I haven't watched any, but I think that's a really good thing because it shows the wider sporting community. And the wider the community is actively interested because Cameron Smith plays for the Melbourne Storm, and Melbourne and the state of Victoria has been badly affected by the bushfires. And now we've got all the flash flooding that we're seeing in New South Wales and Queensland. I think Australia's gone through a lot over the last. We've gone from the worst drought that Australia's had in 100 years to now the worst flooding for 20 years. It's because what happens. We saw it in Townsville last year, just before the NRL season started. This time last year, there was a cyclone that smashed into Townsville, and the North Queensland Cowboys players helped with the flood relief. They got involved with the local community that they play for, and they got involved with the flood relief, which was great to see. And unfortunately, it's something that I've been following since the summer. Well, summer for me, winter for you. I've been following it since last summer for me in the Northern Hemisphere. So last winter for you, I've been following it for about 6 months. It's been, I think, the way it has impacted on sport. It has, but I think the way the authorities have dealt with things has been poor. Has been very, very poor. I think they could have got on top of the conditions sooner. But that's a debate for the other channel that I have. But yes, I have heard lots of reports coming out. The big Bash League. T20 is now becoming the most marketable format of cricket. I think the debate we're having about cricket is, day-night test matches. I think that is the way forward. I think that's the best way forward to get the biggest TV audience and possibly more fans into grounds. The day-night test. I'm in favour of that. But you've got to look at the TV deals around the world that international and domestic cricket has. There are issues with finances. There are issues with participation in some parts of the cricketing community. And the Big Bash, it's not as big as the IPL. I think the Indians have really taken to T20 and really driven it forward. And I actually quite enjoy it. I know not all cricketing purists and traditionalists like the T20 aspect, but I think it's a quite exciting format that can bring a lot of new fans to the sport and has brought a lot of new fans to the sport because guess what? It is still cricket. You've still got 6 ball overs. This 100 format that the UCB are trying to push is a mess. I think T20 is clearly a direction that cricket is taking. It's where a lot of the money is made now. Some of the players can earn some big money playing in T20 formats and T20 leagues across the globe. I think the IPL is the best of the lot, and I've watched a lot of IPL over the years, and I really enjoy watching it when I've been able to get the opportunity. I've seen very little of the Big Bash myself, but again, it's all about the overseas TV deals you can get. And a lot of the overseas TV deals that come out of Australia are on subscription TV. So unfortunately, the rugby league, the AFL, and the cricket, you've got to pay a lot of money in the UK to get be able to watch it. Now, what's interesting is I can actually watch the NRL for cheaper online than with a standard Sky, or in your case, Fox subscription, and it's totally legal. There's the NRL have set up an online streaming service for those not in Australasia to watch the NRL, and I'm going to take it up this year, which means I can now watch every single game for free. Well, not for free, for 120 quid for a year. I can watch every single NRL game and State of Origin, and for me that's an amazing thing, and it works out so much cheaper than a TV subscription for the sport. And the fact that you actually got to meet Steve Smith and Josh Hazlewood. I'm not well versed with Jordan Silk. I don't. He's not as a bigger name, but Hazlewood and Steve Smith, they're big names, big names. And the fact that T20 is attracting Test players to T20 and other formats is great. And I think Steve Smith still got to rebuild his reputation after the sandpaper scandal and the ball tampering. I think that was more of a culture issue within the Australian setup, and I think cricket itself needs to look at its culture, because there's been a lot of negative stories coming out about a lot of cricketers off the field as well. And I think cricket needs to look at itself and the culture that's there within the sport, and really address a lot of lingering issues that have been lingering for quite a few years. Not just within Australian cricket, but English cricket, South African cricket, Kiwi cricket. There's been a lot of culture issues where bad behaviours haven't been necessarily punished, or negative press comes out, and it does damage the image of a sport that is seen as very gentlemanly and very polite, and it's how you sell the product. And when you have those negative headlines, it does damage the PR and the image of a sport. So it's great to see Steve Smith back playing, but I think his reputation, people will still remember him for the ball tampering scandal for a while yet. I think he's got to go away to rebuild trust in himself and Australian cricket as well. But he's an amazing player, but I don't think he was the right guy to be Australia captain. And I think that period of Australian cricket is a big negative as well. I think that's going to sit long in the memory going forward. But I think every nation goes through a scandal of some kind that taints the reputation of the international setup. It's not often that I get cricket fans on the live stream, so it's great to have some cricket convo, which we haven't had for a while. But yeah, I think T20 is the most fun format, but Test cricket for me has to go to day-night tests. It's the best way to avoid. You can get rid of the bad light stoppages of play, and I think it's the best time for prime TV viewing and crowds. I think that's that going into that evening, early night kind of. I think there's something about sporting occasions at night time with the floodlights. There's something about a game taking place at 7:30 at night. Doesn't matter what sport it is, under the floodlights. That for me is something that you can't replicate. If you've seen sport at night, it's amazing. The atmosphere is different. It feels electric, and I think that's one way to really turn fans back onto cricket internationally for the Test game, because we've seen the IPL play night games, we've seen the Big Bash play night games, we've seen one-dayers go into night. I think day-night tests are the way to go to rejuvenate Test cricket. They've just got to work on the ball. I think the pink ball, does it work? But that's something that I would look to for cricket to really focus on. The ICC, I think, needs to go with day-night tests. I think that's the way forward for Test cricket. But T20 is a fun format to watch because it's quick paced, and some of the shot selection and some of the fielding as well. I think it's improved the standard of fielders, and it's definitely improved the standards of batsmen at the high end, because now they're trying stuff in Test cricket that you wouldn't normally see, which makes it entertaining. And that's what sport is. It's also entertainment. But yeah, and the fact you actually got to meet like some big name players like Josh Hazlewood and Steve Smith is something that a lot of fans don't get the opportunity to do. So fair play to you. And if you got their autographs, keep them, because they end up being worth some money at the end of the day. And I think Steve Smith's got a way to go to rebuild his reputation fully after the ball tampering scandal, but I think he's doing that the right way. I don't know what it is about the Gold Coast Titans. Now we've got on to an NRL question. I haven't done my season preview of who I think is going to be top and bottom. I think that's very difficult to predict from season to season because of the salary cap. But I think the Gold Coast Titans, the issue they've had is they don't make finals a lot. They've rarely made the finals. They've had some great players play for them, and they just can't get it together. They've had some brilliant players play for them. They've got some really good players in their squad, and it's just getting a consistent season together. I think the problem they've had is I don't know what it is. There's something about the Gold Coast Titans that is just not working, and I still think they're not going to make finals. I think they're just not good enough. They're not consistent enough, and they don't seem to, they get all the good players together. They can't gel a coherent lineup. They have all these star players come in, and then it's getting that lineup to play as a team. So there's clearly a dressing room culture issue. But yeah, I think getting the right coach is a step in the right direction. But what is the right coach? I think you've got to get the right dressing room culture. You have to have a direction of some kind of direction, and build. You have to build. Consecutively improve. So if you finish, let's say, wooden spoon, aim to improve. That's what the Newcastle Knights have suddenly done in the last couple of seasons. They've worked out. Okay, we've now got these young players coming through. We have a philosophy. We've got a good halfback combo. We can get better. I think the issue the Titans have is they chop and change halfbacks too much. They chop and change lineup too much from season to season. There's no good leadership core there long term. And I think that's where you've got to ask the question about where they're going to finish is they've got to build a core of players, develop those players, and keep a good leadership core together and add bits where you need. They're chopping and changing their squad too much. And that's where I think the problem lies is they've had no consistency in squad from year to year. And then they've made the finals, I think, 3 or 4 times in their existence. They are actually the worst team in the NRL. They've never made the grand final either. So, there are question marks you have to ask about the organisation, behind the scenes, coaching, player development, a whole range of things. You need to look at a whole range of things. It will take more than one season to get them playing regular finals football or making regular appearances in the finals. Amanda Staveley's takeover. Here's the thing: I've not done any reporting on Amanda Staveley's takeover or any takeover for Newcastle because they were never not live. They just didn't take that next step. Now this issue with the Newcastle takeover has been going on for 3 years. He's had the club up for sale for 4 years. So the club's been up for sale since 2016. The first official bid was Amanda Staveley's in 2017 in the October. That bid never completely collapsed. It just stalled. Peter Kenyon's 2 bids, he came out with the second bid. We know that there were active bids on the table when she was bidding. We know when her bid stalled and Peter Kenyon came in, and then Bin Zayed's bid came in, that all these other partners were all still interested in the team. Now, whether Mike Ashley's asking for too much money is something, because I think he's overvaluing the value of the club. And what conditions about sponsorship, because he clearly wants to still have sports director as one of the sponsors. He still wants to have a percentage stake in the club. He's not going to sign it all over straight away. The interesting thing is they've now made the 5th round for the first time since he's been owner. So that means extra revenue. Fans are still unhappy. We've seen the club's value halve since he's owned it. This is, I think, the 3rd time he's had it up for sale. I don't know. It seems to me that listening to how ex-managers have described transfer policy and the ownership, it doesn't sound like very stable off the field. It doesn't. And whether you like Kevin Keegan or Sam Allardyce or Alan Pardew, all of them have stated that the off-field side of things is a mess. Transfer policy, scouting, youth development, the whole thing's a mess off the field and not well run. And I mean, Alan Pardew, I don't particularly like him as a person. I've met him, he's an arsehole. But as a manager, he stated that it was a Mickey Mouse show. He's even stated in an interview that off the field, it is an absolute clown show. Regardless of what happens on the field, he goes, off the field, transfer policy, we're not fully in charge of it. And you've also got to remember, with Newcastle United, is the ongoing tax fraud investigation that came out before he put the club up officially for sale and was accepting bids, which involves Chelsea and West Ham and the Djem Babar transfer. It's a French-led investigation. Now, the news on that's been really quiet over the last year and a half, but that investigation isn't closed. We know arrests and raids have been made, and Newcastle were raided. Their offices had documents taken away. If that is still, I believe that is still an ongoing investigation into the tax affairs of not only Newcastle, but Chelsea, West Ham, and a whole host of French clubs. That's still ongoing. So that might put prospective buyers, they might have a bit of concern about, okay, does this fall on the owner or the club? And the club is a business. Is that because when they take over a business, you've got to take over their tax affairs as well. So the fact that her bid's still there is crucial. I think what Mike Ashley wants to do is get a bidding war, and for all these various parties who want to buy the club to outbid each other, and he gets a better price, which is a risky game because they might all go, no, the club's not worth this much. I'm not overpaying for it. And these are all wealthy individuals. These aren't people who've got no cash. These are wealthy individuals, and Amanda Staveley and Peter Kenyon are footballing people. They have been involved. Amanda Staveley's been involved in takeover bids before, successful or unsuccessful. Peter Kenyon's been, involved with football for most of his professional career. These are people who know what they're doing. These are people who know what they're about. I think Mike Ashley is trying to start a bidding war, but all the bids are coming in at roughly the same amount of money, between 300 and 350 million pounds, and they keep stalling. So clearly there are issues there, and whether that's to do with a tax investigation or Mike Ashley asking for more money and not willing to negotiate on some fine print things, we don't know. I think there's still, he will eventually sell. It's a question for how much and when, and how long it takes, because these takeover bids are becoming very protracted. It's clearly an issue for the club going forward. Newcastle, ironically, could win the FA Cup this season. If they win silverware, suddenly does he not sell the team? Or does the team's value go up because they're guaranteed European football? They've got the prize money from the FA Cup. That makes the team more valuable. If they win the FA Cup, for example, that would be interesting how this cup run goes with Steve Bruce. At the moment, there's nothing else to report apart from, all the bids are active, but no one's come out and said, bang, this bid's been accepted. We're going through the formal paperwork. There's been a lot of misreporting. There's been a lot of vague reporting, a lot of rumours. And until Mike Ashley signs the club over to someone else and he's no longer in the director's box, the club's still his. And I'm not going to do clickbait videos because that's not how the channel works. I'm not interested in clickbait and the rumour mill. And until a deal is done, there's no point reporting on it and how much it's worth. Because all these bids have come in at roughly the same ballpark, between 300 and 350 million, with add-ons and looking at financial fluctuations on the exchange rate and things like that. Until a deal is done, there is no point reporting on it, unless a new party comes out and said, "Look, we're putting in a public offer now. We've declared our interest. We're putting down an offer publicly, and we want to take over this club." Amanda Staveley, we know about that. Peter Kenyon, we know about his 2 bids. We know about Bin Zayed. We know about the Saudi attempted takeover, unless that's just pure made up, just to attract more interest. We know there are bids on the table. We know there are active bids at various stages. This has been a very protracted saga, though, that I think is damaging Newcastle United's fortunes on the pitch and off the pitch, apparently. And this is according to some ex-managers, it's not the best run club off the field. And the value of the club is less than what it was when he took over. So he's obviously going to want to try and recoup some money from it, from his initial investment. If they win the FA Cup, does that change things? Absolutely. He might take the club off the table. He might, say the club's not for sale. Or he might then go, now the club's worth some more money now because we've won silverware. We've got extra revenues. Do I think Chelsea, Man United in the FA Cup? I think that's a difficult one. That is a difficult one. Looking at it, Chelsea, they're in a fight for the top 4. I mean, Sheffield United are breathing down their neck. They're well back from the rest of their rivals. They are sort of in no man's land in the league, kind of. There's no one in front of them they can catch, really. And behind them, the gap is closing with Sheffield United. So they need a good cup run. Man United are massively underperforming. And especially against the bigger clubs, they are massively underperforming. I don't know what really. I'm not going to try and predict, but I think Frank Lampard and Chelsea, I think they're in a transition phase. Man United, that club is a tyre fire, absolute tyre fire. But I'm not even going to try and predict a result with that one. I think it could go to penalties. It honestly could go to penalties. I hope it's not as bad as that final, the FA Cup final they played out a couple of years ago, because that was the worst FA Cup final in my lifetime, possibly of all time. But the risk is that they play a game like that. But it's winner take all. There's no replay anymore, so they have to win on the night. I think Chelsea might. I think Chelsea will probably come out on top in that one. I just think Man United, they're right now, they're so inconsistent, and they're just not performing. And I don't think the squad's good enough to really challenge for any silverware. I don't think they deserve to challenge for any silverware. I think they do need to rebuild. But unfortunately, the way the club is set up and the way the club has been since the Premier League era, they're built to win. They're not built for a rebuild. And they heavily rely on the European money as well. And because the club's got so much depth with the way the Glazers own the club, and the fact they rely on loans and investors to keep pumping money into the club, because they actually don't have a lot of their own money anymore. They're asset rich, not cash rich. So Man United need a trophy, but at the same time, and they're a team that's built to win right now. They have to win every season, basically. And unfortunately, they don't have the squad to do it. The youth system isn't working as effectively as it was 20, 30 years ago. So the class of 92, for example, they're not producing that caliber of player all at the same time. And I think they're overpaying. They're definitely overpaying players on some of their contracts. So, Danny Rose, I can't stand Danny Rose. He whinges about not getting paid enough money when he's on 50k a week. He wants 100k. I think Danny Rose is half decent, but I think he's had a couple of good seasons. But otherwise, he's an average player. But I think, yes, it adds some squad depth for Newcastle for the league, but I think he's cup tied, so he can't play in the FA Cup, which is, again, a massive problem. Newcastle have a lot of injuries. I am surprised over some of Tottenham's transfer policy. I think it's starting to come out and bite them. It really is. They've lost Christian Eriksen. They forced him out the door. He said he was made to feel like the black sheep. He got very tired with the speculation over his future, and I can't blame him on that one. Their transfer policy has perplexed me for a while. I think they put too much money into the stadium. I think they needed to win trophies first before they did the stadium rebuild. And they haven't done that. I think that squad's peaked as a group, and I don't think Mourinho is necessarily the right manager to take the job on. But Pochettino, I don't think his heart was in it this season before he got sacked. I think the group has peaked. I think, yeah, they've got rid of Trippier. They got rid of Rose on loan. I think Newcastle will sign him at the end of the season as well. I think he'll get signed by Newcastle on a free. So Trippier's out the door. Danny Rose is out the door. Eriksen's out the door. Some key components of how they've been good in recent seasons have gone. And I don't think the players they brought back in to replace them are doing as well as those players at their peak. So I think, yeah, Tottenham, I think, have shot their bolt. I think their race is run as a title contender. And I think, yeah, I don't think they're good enough going forward to be a big six club. I really don't think they're going to be challenging for the European places or trophies for a while. I really don't. FA Cup notwithstanding, I think they underperform in big crunch games. Champions League final, FA Cup semi-final, the Premier League title race against Leicester, they end up finishing third. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. Same with Arsenal as well. I think some of these clubs that have been at the top end of English football for so long are suddenly surprised when other clubs who are better run financially and have better team chemistry are above them. And the fan bases don't like it either. But I think every team has its successful period and every team has its droughts. And now we're seeing teams like Arsenal and Man United, Chelsea to a certain extent, go through their dry patches. And it is what it is. But I think the Tottenham squad is underperforming, but again, that time when they didn't make any transfers for 18 months, I think is coming home to hit them hard. And because the stadium went over budget and over completion date, I think that's hurt them as well. I don't follow the NBA massively. I'll watch the occasional game here or there. I'll do the occasional video on NBA history and team histories and player profiles, but I'm not a massive NBA fan. I never really have been. It's just I never enjoyed basketball playing it as a kid, and that's like 20 years ago. Now I'm 30. I never enjoyed basketball as a kid at school. It was one of those compulsory sports you had to play for a couple of years before you could make your choice. I never enjoyed it. And when you don't enjoy a sport as a kid, be it watching or playing, you're not going to enjoy it as an adult. I understand why people like basketball and why people play basketball, but for me, it's not a sport that I enjoy or I follow. I had a brief interest in the 90s after Space Jam, and I think that's what I think you can do with sport is make that kind of PR thing. Yeah, as I say, I'm not a basketball fan, but I understand again why people enjoy. But I think it's not a sport that I enjoy because I prefer my contact team sports more. That's my personal preference. I prefer rugby league. I prefer rugby union. I prefer ice hockey, NHL. I prefer the AFL. I like my contact sports. It's just personal preference. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with basketball. It's just not a sport I was any good at because I'm not 6 foot, not 7 foot tall. I'm not like 7 billion foot tall. It's not a sport that I enjoyed, but I know people who are massive fans of it, and it is personal preference. It does have a big presence here in the UK with the media deal that they have, and the fact that the NBA does play a London series every year at the O2, the former Millennium Dome, for those who are old enough. But it's not a sport that I follow. But I will do videos on it, absolutely. I will look into the history of the sport, and I've done a few history videos, and I've done a few NBA videos, but it's not something that I'm passionate about. Same with Major League Baseball. I'm not a big fan of baseball either. I never have been. I find that is a sport that I just can't get into. I've watched the occasional game, but I don't enjoy it. But again, I've done my fair share of videos on Major League Baseball, and I've said my piece. I've looked at why Major League Baseball only started playing games in London last year. I think that was a massive mistake by the MLB. I think they could have come when they initially planned to in 2017. So it is what it is. But no, I think the NBA. There's a reason why it's the most profitable league in the world. It's the reason, and it's another reason why its players are the highest paid athletes on average in the world. There's a reason why it's successful, but for me, it's not a sport that I enjoy. But ironically, the NBA would not exist without the NHL. Bear that in mind. The NHL owners are the reason why the NBA got set up. They wanted to fill their arenas when they weren't playing hockey games. There is a link between the NHL and NBA. Hence why their seasons run concurrently as well and parallel. There is a historical link there. So that's something that would surprise a lot of people. Is the reason why the NBA exists in its current format, it's as the NBA, is because of the NHL. And basketball was invented by a Canadian. So there's something else that is a little tidbit. I think what brought basketball to the consciousness of non-basketball fans was the Raptors winning last year. I think he does play. I think his fitness is the main concern on a playing point of view. When it comes to Israel Folau, he's already. I've done so many videos. I should have an Israel Folau playlist just separately on this channel because he's created that much division, and even now, some of the comments section, you got to read some of the comments. There's the debate about freedom of speech, and there's the debate about hate speech, and I think the controversy's done now. I think he's been told in no uncertain terms, any slip up, he's done. And Catalan have been told if he slips up, you're getting a massive fine. He will play, otherwise they wouldn't have signed him. I think he will play. When it all depends on his fitness, because he hasn't played competitive rugby of either code for a long time now. It's like having a long injury layoff. So he's got to get himself into shape, and that's why I thought it was a big risk, because his age. He's thankfully stayed injury free for the majority of his career, so he hasn't had many injuries to contend with. But his match fitness and his physical fitness, I think, is the big concern. But once you get him on the field, I can see other players targeting him, actually giving him some rough treatment, and the fan reactions are going to be really interesting. Really, really interesting. I think Catalan are known to be a bit of a club that like to go against the grain. They've signed, Todd Carney and Greg Bird before, so they don't mind having controversial players from Australia in their squad. They've shown in the past that they don't mind a bit of controversy, and I think Greg Bird and Todd Carney are probably worse than Israel Folau for their off-field antics. But Catalan signed them in the past, and there wasn't the hoorah. So I think because social media, the rise of social media in recent years, I think, it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens and what Israel Folau we get, because rugby league has evolved as a sport since he last played, and I would expect players to target him. They're going to aim for him. They're going to be fired up to take him on, because players will come out and say they don't want to play with him. I can see him, taking some physical punishment and some physical extracurricular treatment from other players, and I think so it could be interesting. I think we're going to have to see what how he responds to that. But only a month to go till the NRL kicks off, and I will be getting my NRL subscription online, so I'll be able to watch every game. Even if I have to catch up because of my work hours, I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, my time to go to work, and so it'd be nice when I get in from work just to watch a game or two on the old catch up. But yeah, you had work. You enjoy your day at work. I thankfully am off work till the 12th, so I've got a couple more days of holiday. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the NRL. I really am. I really, really am. And I'm looking forward to the World Club Challenge, and I'm looking forward to the Charity Shield between St George and South Sydney. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Latrell Mitchell plays at the other Sydney club. Oh yeah, he's crossed the divide. So I think it's going to be a very wide open season, but I still think the Gold Coast Titans could be the worst team of the lot. I just don't understand how the Gold Coast can't, make finals. Just make finals. They've only made it, I think, 3 or 4 times in their history. So that's something. Oh, we have a Panthers fan. Oh dear. Oh, good old Penrith. It's good having so many Australians, in the chat, because you give your perspective on things. And obviously, with what's happened with the bushfires and now the flooding, it's a real tough time for Australians right now. And sport has a way of uniting people. So I'm looking forward to the AFL season. I'm looking forward to the NRL season. It's going to be fun, real good fun. And, I'm probably going to watch some more AFL games this season. I haven't watched many over the last couple of years, so I'm really looking forward to catching more AFL games this year as well. That's something that I haven't done for the last couple of years. I've sort of not watched as much of that as I would like. So expect some more AFL videos as well on the channel. Adelaide's an interesting one, though, because if you're in Adelaide, the NRL has been in Adelaide before. Rugby league has professionally. It didn't work. And I'm really surprised that the NRL hasn't looked to expanding to 18 teams, because it's been as high as 20 teams before, and looking at Perth and Adelaide. So the fact that you've got Port Adelaide in the AFL, and you've got Adelaide as well, is kind of good to see. But I would love to see an NRL team in Adelaide. That would be great fun. But it's whether people in Adelaide want to support rugby league as well. You need to have enough fans there who want to support the code. But yeah, and let's see if the Panthers can have a good season as well, because they've got some good young players. I just find it weird that the NRL has decided to stay on the East Coast, and how can they call themselves a national competition when they don't have teams in South Australia or Western Australia, Tasmania, and the Northern Territory? I just do not understand how they can say we're a national competition. Really, the AFL, I think, for me, is the code that's won, in the sense that it has more registered fans, registered club members, more registered players, and it's played across the country. I just do not understand how the NRL's thinking with not looking at Adelaide and Perth. And Perth is the fastest growing city in Australia. I'm really surprised they haven't given that a second go. Because when the NRL was set up, there were 20 teams and now there's 16. So, you know, I'm just really surprised by their not looking at those locations. But I have to admit, I think the AFL has definitely won the battle at grassroots level over and Aussie Rules has won that code battle. But rugby league's not far behind. I think I'm really surprised with the NRL not looking at Perth and looking at Adelaide to go, we could grow this league to 18 teams. We could put teams in these locations and it would work. I think it would work. But we'll have to see what happens with the coming seasons when the next TV deals are up for renewal and direction both sports decide to take, because I think Perth is crying out for an NRL team. I think Adelaide, I think it could work. I honestly think it could work. As long as it's, I wouldn't say relocation, because you've got the fan bases in Sydney and in Queensland that are for their teams, and the NRL has merged teams before, and that's really, the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Obviously, they missed a couple of seasons because they were told they had to merge or leave the league, and then they took it to the court and won and got readmitted. So I think the NRL has to be careful. I think they're better off growing the game rather than moving teams, because if you move a struggling team, be it for financial or whatever reasons, it's still going to struggle. Those players are still going to be the same players that they had before. And I've looked at the history of the Western Suburb Magpies merging with the Balmain Tigers to make West Tigers. So relocating a team, it rarely happens in the modern day, and relocation teams generally aren't very successful. So if you want to have a successful team, you have to start from scratch. You have to build success. You can't just go, oh, this team's not doing very well financially in Sydney or Gold Coast. We'll move them. Let's move them to Adelaide or Perth, because that team, because it's struggling on the field, will still be a crap team. And the best way to make money is to have a successful team. So you build a successful team. That's why expansion, I think, is the way forward. I think you allow 2 expansion teams. You allow them to select players from the other existing 16 teams, plus from reserve grade, to build 2 squads. Build teams together. You have protected lists and then expansion list, like they do in the NHL, with what they did with Vegas in the NHL and what they're going to do with Seattle in the NHL. You have like an expansion kind of draft kind of thing and transfers, and you allow those clubs to settle, and then you give funding to the grassroots to improve the grassroots level, so you have a pathway for kids to then go Aussie Rules Rugby League. Which and because I don't think they've done that with Melbourne. They don't do that with Melbourne, the Melbourne Storm. They put a team in Melbourne, the league's team, and God, they've got away with so much stuff. But rugby league in Victoria is nothing. They haven't got enough schools playing it. They haven't got enough grassroots clubs playing it. They put a team there because guess who's from Melbourne? Rupert Murdoch. Guess who's got shares in the team? Rupert Murdoch. Guess who's got the TV deal? Rupert Murdoch. That's the problem. Rupert Murdoch nearly killed rugby league in Australia, and he's tried his best to destroy it in the UK as well. I'm not a big fan of Rupert Murdoch. Not a lot of people are, but no, I think the NRL. I think they've got to look at how other leagues do expansion. The AFL has done it very, very well, very, very well. That's why they've got 18 teams. The AFL has done expansion very, very well. You've got the protected list. You've got expansion. You had the list system, which is similar to the draft system. I think the NRL, if they want to Oh, I think the Melbourne Storm, while they're a good team, they've had some assistance along the way with some breaches of the salary cap and some hidden little contracts under the table. I think the Melbourne Storm, great team, no players coming through the youth system in Victoria making the NRL. It's not just Melbourne, it's you look at where players come from. There are even players from Western Australia by birth playing in the NRL. There's not a single Victorian playing in the NRL, born and raised. So that tells me that while they put a great team in Melbourne, they're not developing the grassroots and they're losing out to the AFL. Yeah, the AFL has gone to rugby league's backyard and had some very successful teams in the expansion to Brisbane and to Sydney. So the AFL have got it right with the grassroots. The NRL have got it wrong. And they need to look at developing amateur clubs, grassroots youth level clubs, working with the schools to offer rugby league, cricket, rugby union, AFL, put it on the curriculum and get kids playing. Because until you get kids and those playing casually, like the amateurs playing, you're not going to develop players to strengthen the playing talent pool. It's just too Queensland and New South Wales centric, and I think that's where I think Australia has the problem long term. Whereas the AFL is nationwide, you've got players from all round the country playing in the AFL. You've got Tasmanians and lads from the Northern Territory who don't have AFL teams playing in the AFL. Because you've got the regional leagues playing at a high level as well, where AFL teams can see a guy playing in the Northern Territory in Darwin or Tasmania in Launceston playing really well and go, we can offer you a tryout and a contract for Ben Brown at North Melbourne. He's from Tasmania. So I think you got to look at that. Oh, playing the Roosters first game. Wow. Yeah, that's going to be fun. Look, the salary cap means that Latrell Mitchell is no longer a Roosters player. He's moved. I think it's the salary cap really evens the playing field. I don't know. We'll have to see how preseason goes for all the NRL teams, and we have to see, how the first few weeks go before we can get a real, idea of how the season's going to play out. But if you look at my NRL videos from last year, when I did the opening 7 rounds, I think, then I took a bit of a break, and then because of my job, I started my new job, and so I didn't have a lot of time to really focus on the NRL as much as I wanted to last summer because I was focusing on my job. And then I met my ex-partner, and you know how that all went. Not very well. I sort of lost track a little bit. I didn't keep up to date as much as I would want to. But after about round 6, round 7, Brisbane and the Panthers were struggling. I did 2 videos on Penrith and the Broncos going, these teams, they're not doing great. Their defenses aren't good enough. They're not scoring enough points. And suddenly both teams went on winning streaks and turned their seasons around a little bit. So I wouldn't say you've had it. The Roosters could struggle out the gate. And they have played a lot of extra rugby league over the Panthers, a lot of miles on those legs for players. And they've lost Latrell Mitchell to the Souths. So I would say the Roosters could be vulnerable. They've got no Cooper Cronk in the halves and no Latrell Mitchell in the outside back. So I think there's an opportunity there to catch the Roosters a little bit. But we'll have to see what happens. You've got pre-season yet. Players can go down injured before the season even starts. There could be some more off-season scandal like we've had the last couple of years of the NRL with players getting in trouble. So anything can happen between now and the first game of the season in a month's time. Anything could happen. Absolutely. So I wouldn't worry too much just yet. You got to start worrying when you haven't got a win. But until a ball is kicked and a pass made and a tackle completed, don't worry. Have faith. I think have faith in the players you have, and I would if you get off to a slow start to the season and then you've got you're coming in, you're playing against an informed team, then I would worry. But at the moment, the season hasn't even started. You're not in pre-season yet, therefore I wouldn't honestly panic. I wouldn't honestly panic until the first actual meaningful game in anger is played, and you'll get an idea of how your team's going to do after the first, I would say, month of the season. and there's time to fix things after about 2 months of the season and you're still struggling, that's when you can say, yeah, write off, or we're making finals, we're not going to make finals. That's my opinion on things. Until the first match is played in anger, a fully competitive match, I don't put too much faith in preseason. There's a sense of working out who's going to be the form teams or not, because that's when coaches, tinker with formations, put some fringe players in the starting lineup, rest players, work on some new tactics that might be done in training. So until the first ball is the first kickoff and the first tackle and the first set and the first try or the first points are on the board, wouldn't worry too much. I would say, yeah, round 6, round 7. If you're having issues by then, you haven't got a win or you're struggling for wins, that's when you got to start asking, okay, why look at the losses? Okay, points for and against, and then you look at your overall record. But I think it's too far out. It's around between round 6 and about round 10 that teams are working out if they're making finals or not. And even then, there could be teams making a late push and making the finals that at the beginning of the season, people like, this team ain't playing very well, and suddenly, wow, this team's one of the best teams performing in the league. So it's too early yet to say, oh, this team's going to make it, this team's going to be the favourites. I think it's going to be very hard for the Roosters to make it 3 in a row as well. They've lost Cronk, he's retired. Latrell Mitchell's moved on, so I think, yeah. I mean, pre-season is pre-season. You just want to get your match fitness up and get your combinations working and work out what's a good combination, what's a bad combination. Give some of the younger players and some of the fringe players a bit of game time, because they're going to be called upon when injuries and suspensions in the season take toll. But yeah, until the first ball is kicked and until the first tackle is completed, there's no point in worrying. It's when players go down injured in pre-season training and pre-season matches. That's when you go, okay, now we're missing a key component. But pre-season's where you get your squad settled and your lineup settled, and that's where you can find that diamond in the rough where you go, oh, this guy in reserve grade, I think he's good enough for the main squad. We'll call him in. So yeah, there is still time, but month out, there's a lot can happen in a month. Players can go down ill, go down injured. Off-field antics, as we've seen in the last few off seasons, have tarnished the NRL, and that's something that Todd Greenturd, as I call him, Todd Greenberg's been very vocal about, is the off-season antics and misbehaviours of players, making the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and that's happened again this off-season. So that message clearly isn't getting through. So a lot can happen in the next month. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there because for me it's 8:30 in the evening. So I've got a busy day tomorrow. I've got the waterboard coming over. I've got get the waterboard coming over, which is going to be fun. So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. Hopefully you have a good day in Adelaide, and I do hope that the flooding isn't too bad, and I hope the fires stop, because that's been so destructive for the last 9 months now, 6, 7, 8 months of bushfires, and it's got to the point in the last 2-3 months where it's been dreadful, and now we're seeing some of the heaviest rain for 20 years, and so we're seeing a lot of flooding. So I hope you all keep well in Australia and look after yourselves, and I'll have some more videos for you lot soon.